Or you could be the teacher or the gardener or somebody who makes 50 grand a year, or maybe you and your spouse make 100 grand a year. You can have a good middle-class lifestyle that leads to financial freedom after a certain amount of years by ultimately having discipline, saving a bunch of money, learning a niche, investing that money, and then slowly over a long period of time, creating passive income. Ultimately, you stop trading your time for money, and little by little, you start replacing new income that comes in, and that surpasses your expenses. Welcome back to The Donkey
and the Bee,
where men are jackasses
and women are biatches,
where we work together to build an extraordinary life.
Tune in to up your game in your marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances. Welcome back to another episode of The Donkey and the Bee with your hosts, Brett and Laura Shawkavis. He is the donkey over there. That's Brett. I am the bee. I am Laura.
The biatch.
Yeah, thanks, babe. You know what donkey stands for. And we talk all things marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances on our show. And today we are talking about a phrase that gets tossed around a lot, and it's financial freedom. And so we are going to be discussing financial freedom, what that is, what that looks like for each individual person, and then also discussing your financial freedom number. What is the number? What number are you trying to hit? How do you get to that number? How does that number make sense for you and your family?
Yeah. So if somebody has a goal of financial freedom, we'll unpack what it actually means. But how do you know when you actually get to that goal, right? You have to have a quantifiable target. So that's that financial freedom number. And we set a number for ourselves when we were just figuring this thing out. We were still waiting tables, working 2 or 3 jobs, hating our life, and said, hey, if we get to this number, then it'll be easy street, right? Like we'll be over the rainbow and the grass is always green and all these good things. Now, you fast forward and you know that it only gets harder and harder, right? It's always perspective. Life is what you make of it, whether you have finances or not. But nonetheless, there are a lot more things that we are able to do with our time and opportunity once we have achieved this financial freedom number. So I want to talk through, how do you start, right? Like, how do you figure out what this number actually is? Why is it important to you? And then how long should it take to get there? And what do you do actually when you do get there?
Well, let's first dive into what is financial freedom. Like, what is the definition of that? What does that mean to you? Because I want to hear what it means to you, and then I'll tell you what I think.
So I believe that you've hit financial freedom when you can stop trading your time for money. Ultimately, if I said I'm not going to actively work today, how long can I live for, financially speaking? If it is to the end of my life, that is financial freedom. By contrast, if I stop working today and I have 2 weeks until I run out of money and I can't pay my bills anymore, then my financial runway is about 2 weeks. If I can live for 3 years, then that's my financial runway. But ultimately, how do I have a system where I can have income that comes in every single month that exceeds my expenses? And when I hit that marker, then by default, I can live, financially speaking, indefinitely and always have my bills covered. And that is what I define as financial freedom.
I would say the same exact thing. You literally took the words out of my mouth, honestly.
Wow.
No, you said it a lot better, probably more eloquently than I would have said. But I would have said pretty much trading, it's just time for money. That's exactly in essence what it is. And so I would have said, if you can stop working now, you're not trading your time, and indefinitely have enough finances to get you through, then that's financial freedom, which I would assume, reading the statistics on individuals who live paycheck to paycheck, that most people aren't even thinking about financial freedom because they're just trying to keep their head above water. And so this is why we're talking about this, because this doesn't get taught very often, especially in our school system. And so we want to show you how we got financial freedom, how we got to that number, and how we're not stopping. Even though we already hit the financial freedom, we're still working hard.
Yeah. So I think we talked about what it is, but we should also talk about what it's not. Because a lot of people have this idea that it's being rich. Once you have a big income and you have some rental properties and you have a fancy car and you put your kids in private school, that's financial freedom.
It's financial prison, I think. Sorry, that's my word.
Okay, well, it's definitely not,
Yeah.
right? Not the accepted definition of financial freedom. That's just high income and high expense,
Exactly.
right? But a lot of these people who have very high incomes, as soon as they stop having this income, right, then everything tumbles down, right? They have all of these liabilities and they all cost money every single month. And then as soon as you stop trading your time for money, your deal changes, something happens where you don't have this big high income anymore, then nothing, right? You have nothing left. It all comes tumbling down.
Yeah, you're the doctor, you're the lawyer, you make a huge income, but you have to continue to work each and every day in order to keep that income so you can pay off all of these liabilities that you've purchased.
Yeah. So you can achieve financial freedom as that high income earner, right? You can make $300,000-500,000 a year, save a good amount of that, invest it, create passive income. Or you could be the teacher or the gardener or somebody who makes $50,000 a year, or maybe you and your spouse make $100,000 a year. You can have a good middle class lifestyle that leads to financial freedom after a certain amount of years by ultimately having discipline, saving a bunch of money, learning a niche, investing that money, and then slowly over a long period of time, creating passive income. Ultimately, you stop trading your time for money, and little by little, you start replacing new income that comes in, and that surpasses your expenses.
I like that you use the word slow because I think with our social media age that it is in, it's very much a get rich quick type of scheme, right? You see all these people on their lavish vacations, on their yachts, driving their private jets, and you think, wow, like I need to think of something that I can get rich quick. But I think it's a slow play. It's like the Warren Buffett way, like where he didn't get really wealthy until what, like 25, 30 years down the road on his investing journey. And so I think that's important to say that it's slow, that it's not something that you, unless you like win the lottery or something like that, which is like a 1 in 14 million chance. It's a slow play. It's something that you diligently work for and that you use discipline in every area of your life to achieve that.
So if it's slow, if it takes a long period of time, it's the snowball slowly growing down the hill, then the most important factor there is time. The longer you're in this game, the more wealth you build, the more opportunity you have to create additional second, third, 12th flows of income to surpass your expenses, to get out of this rat race, to achieve your financial freedom number. So if you haven't started yet, then literally start today, right? Like we started teaching our daughters at 4 and 6 years old how to create income, how to split that money, how to save 70% of it. And now they've already bought their first rental property. And they, my youngest is 9 years old, the oldest is 12 and have their first rental property. We understood, no one taught us this lesson. We didn't hear it till we were probably in our 30s. But if somebody had taught me this lesson as a child before I'm even a teenager, and then I started having a system to learn this thing, man, the time, they just save like 20, 30 years on most people who figure this out by the time they're in their 30s or 40s or 50s, right? Time is so valuable to start on this thing early.
So let's specifically talk about this financial freedom number, like the actual number. So how do you get to this number? How do you, is it an equation? Is it just something that you write down, you figure out? Like where do you get to this number?
So everyone will have their own number. It's different from us versus somebody else. But I think if you're single or if you're a married couple, you should do this activity together. And I like it to be super simple. This is the way I think of it. If you have achieved financial freedom, that means that you can afford to stop trading your time for money. You can stop working and have higher amounts of income than your expenses. So if it's that simple, then I think it's simple enough to determine what are my expenses. And I just need to be above that. I can literally be $1 above that, or I can be $1 zillion above it. But as long as I know what my expenses are and I surpass that, then I have achieved this place of financial freedom. So ultimately, I think of it in the simplest terms of what are my expenses? What do I spend every single month? And then again, I don't want to look at it from a lifetime perspective. I don't want to look at it even from a yearly perspective. My bills are due every month, right? I got to pay the mortgage or the rent. I got to pay the phone bill. I got my car, whatever it is. It's monthly, most of these things. So I think it's best if you say, what are my bills on average every single month? What are my expenses? And then from there, I just know that I need to surpass that in some way, either a little bit of surpass that or a lot surpass that.
So, for example, I'm just going to throw a number out there. Say there is a married couple. They're in their mid 30s. They've been, saving, buying some assets and investing their money. And say they have their expenses total are $8,000 a month. So are you saying that if they had assets in place that are paying at least a minimum of $8,000, it can be over, that they are financially free at that point because the assets are producing that income for them? They're not necessarily working for it?
They can be. I think you just simplify it in this example and say, okay, can that couple quit their jobs that day and have the $8,001 that comes in from other sources? Can that pay the $8,000 a month?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a couple questions that kind of leads to that is, what type of other income do you have? Is it stable? Is it consistent? Will it grow with inflation? Or is it kind of wishy-washy, right? Like, we invest in real estate. Every single month, tenants need to pay. Okay, COVID and stuff happened, right? There was a little bit of stuff. Sometimes you have to evict tenants, but you can take your overall, portfolio and say, okay, my portfolio is at 95% occupancy, whatever it is. I have such and such for bad debt and repairs, right? You're going to take all that into account. Roughly, I'm kicking off this much a month. If I'm kicking off $8,500 a month in passive income from my portfolio, whatever that is, and I have pretty hard expenses of about $8,000 a month, as long as I'm not going crazy, this is not counting vacations and things like that, then yeah, at that point, I could quit my W-2 job and say, okay, now I have this opportunity of time freedom because my passive income has exceeded my expenses.
So besides real estate, say someone else's niche is not real estate, but they're earning, say for equal equations here, $8,000 from something else. How do you know if that's like going to be a stable income and just stop working at that point?
There's a lot of different niches out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're in this real estate game because we know that it's a proven thing. People always need this, right? There's people who invest in crypto, and I would say that's not stable.
Mm-hmm.
If you're getting a certain return, the last couple of years in crypto, I mean, it's so volatile.
Mm-hmm.
I would not put my eggs in that basket.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, right? Maybe you know that space. Or perhaps you have like books that have done well, and every single month or year you get a certain income from residual book sales or intellectual property. There's lots of different ways to do it. But I know real estate, and that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel that's very safe, but we've become experts in that, right? We weren't experts overnight. It took us a decade to learn all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's really what this goes down to. As you are paying off bad debt, as you are saving to invest, this is when you are growing your knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just pick something at random. You made on the front side to see if you want to like it, if you want to kind of explore that, but it may not be for you. But there's multiple different niches out there, and there's so many books, so many podcasts that you can listen to. You can get a coach to do these things. Every single niche that we've gotten into, we've paid a coach to show us, here's a blueprint for these things.
Mm-hmm.
And someone has already been successful, and I think that's the best way to go, is just follow that path.
So you determine your number based on your monthly expenses. How long do you think that it should take to get to that number, which I feel like is going to be so volatile? It's going to be all over the place because it's based on each person, each individual. So in your opinion, how long should it take to reach that number?
It's really whatever your goals are, right? I think that there are definitely a play to say, hey, here's a strategy that I can get here in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And think of it this way. Some people are like, hey, you know what? I'm not a big real estate guy. I'm not this big money-making person. I'm not a business person. I'm a stay-at-home mom, right? And I have a little side hustle. Fantastic, right? Like if you said, okay, our family, our income, we spend about $6,000 a month. How do I replace $6,000 a month? And if you bought one rental property and, perhaps the income on it is about $2,000 a month, and maybe the debt on it, the PITI is about $1,500. So you have $500 a month in cash flow. Okay, that's right now. But what happens in 10 years, right? The rents have gone up. Maybe it's $2,800. Maybe your debt has gone down to, $1,100. So now you have a bigger spread. What happens in 20 years, right? Do you now have a $2,000 a month spread on that? Can you, every couple years, right? Even if you're not a big income person, can you every 2 or 3 or 5 years buy another rental property? If your goal is how do I replace my $6,000 a month, can you do it in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? You're going to pay off that mortgage, right? The rents will continue to increase. So from that perspective, I think this is a plan that realistically any person can execute, regardless of their financial intelligence, regardless of how much money they make. If you say, hey, you know what? I know I can get this thing done in 20 years. All I got to do is wait for debt to go down and rents to go up, and my spread will increase. I'm starting with a small spread, and that's just fine. I'm going to continue to reinvest that. And you know what? Here is my plate for a single mom to be able to say, I'm going to hit financial freedom. I'm going to hit retirement 20 years from now. And I think that is 100% entirely achievable for virtually everybody.
I mean, gosh, when we first started investing in real estate, our first couple of rentals, we barely made any money. Like, to be completely honest, I think we broke even on a few of them those first maybe year. And I think that we were okay with that at the time because we had the long-term game. We weren't thinking of monthly income now. We were thinking of, wealth later. And so I think we had that future mindset. But slow. That's what we keep saying. I keep thinking of a snail. I don't know why. But I feel like, yes, we did it in 7 years or so. But I think because it was a snowball and it kind of built. It started really slow. It started as a little pebble and it went down the hill and got a little bigger. And so I think that same thing with the William Buffett example. That's how he built his wealth too.
Warren Buffett.
Did I say Warren Buffett?
You said William Buffett.
Did I say William Buffett?
Yeah.
Oh,
just to be clear, we're not talking about somebody else.
Warren Buffett. I'm sorry. Did I really say William?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My bad. Wow, brain fart. Because in the grand scheme and the big game of it all, if you have these rentals, if the interest rate is lower, you can refi. You can lower your monthly payment. And then at some point, you could probably increase your rents. And so it's almost kind of just this little game that you play with each rental or with each apartment building or whatever you're investing in. And so the long-term game is really where wealth is built. And I think that a lot of individuals have a hard time with that long-term game. They think of just now and think of now and this month and my expenses and my bills. They're not thinking, 5-10 years from now, gosh, if I were to purchase that building or that house 5 or 10 years ago, what would it be now? I mean, the appreciation on real estate is so phenomenal. And then not to even mention the tax benefit that you can with depreciating. And so I think all of those things encompass wealth building, the long-term game. What's it going to be like 5-10 years from now? So I think I would encourage all listeners to think of it that way and not stay closed where you have these little, I think of horses when they're walking and they have these little blinders on the side where they're just looking straight ahead. I think you need to take those blinders off and look around, look toward the future and think of your future self and how your future self would be thinking about money and investments.
Yeah, I think that's good. So I know, people talk about this financial independence, financial freedom, this number we're talking about. And a lot of people are like, okay, well, the sooner I get there, the better, right? Like that's the line in the sand. Mm-hmm. How do I get there faster? One of it is obviously you just decrease that number, right? If we're talking about this example of a couple that spends $8,000 a month in expenses. Well, what happens if you cut your expenses down to $4,000?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not that you're going to get there in half the time. You're probably going to get there in like a quarter of the time, right? It'll be so much easier to get there. So I know a lot of people who are excited about like, hey, you know what? Let me downsize. Let me tiny home this thing, right? Let me live on beans and rice and we're not going to take any vacations, right? Or maybe we just camp and stay in tents, right? Like people have different ways to go about this and everyone's going to be different. So, another little hack there is if you just despise your job, you hate your boss and you want to give him the bird and say, hey, I am quitting. I have my financial independence number covered. then just lower that number, right? Like, what can you cut out of these expenses? And if you have debts right now in that expenses, don't count that, right? Like, pay that off. Your car payments, your credit card debt, that shouldn't be included in these numbers, because ultimately, once you get to that point, you should have no bad debts. So for us, we did not decrease that number, right? Like, we like a certain lifestyle. We're not very lavish. We're not spending excessive amounts of money, but we didn't go the way of, hey, let's cut everything down so low and get there. Because ultimately, what happens when you get there, right? You and I had this conversation 2-3 years ago, and it was kind of a transition period between, we have our business that was stable and we were barely working. And it was like, okay, we are starting a new business. What do we want to do? How much time do we want to spend on this? How big do we want to grow this thing? And we looked at each other and just had to have a conversation saying like, okay, well, we're already here, right? Like, we can not do this new business. We can leave our other business kind of on autopilot and we can travel, right? Our kids are still in school. So maybe, I don't know, are we going to homeschool and travel, or what are we going to do? But ultimately we had this conversation and we were like, well, man, like, we were really, really bored. Like, we don't watch TV at all, right? Unless it's like football or something. Like, if it's not football season, the TV really doesn't get turned on. So what are we going to do all day if we're not having a business, right? So I think that's for everyone to decide. What is it for you that are your goals? And honestly, if you're in a spot right now where you hate your job, then you're going to come at it from this perspective, I got to get out of this thing, right? But once you have gotten there, then the mindset switches and it's like, dang, this is actually really boring. I need another challenge. I need to grow myself.
Well, I think that's where the freedom hits. I think that financial freedom can encompass also time freedom, because like what you just said, if you work hard and you get to that number and you're like, okay, I'm here, what am I going to do now? Well, you can do anything you want. When you think about it, like, you can continue working. You could start your own business. You can go get a part-time job at Costco or Home Depot honestly, like, you could do whatever you want at that point. And so I think it's the freedom of choice at that point when you hit that financial freedom number. So, for us, we hit it and we're like, okay, well, we're not just going to not work. Like, if you're not growing, you're dying is how we view life and just personal growth and experience. And so if we're not pushing ourselves and growing ourselves, then what are we doing? We're not becoming that version of ourselves that, God has really placed in our life. And so that was something we probably will never do, is stop working. We will probably continue to work even in our 60s and 70s. That's just something that we enjoy doing. But I think it's that point where we choose to put our time. Where do we want to work? I think that's where it comes into play.
Yeah. You get to a place and you have this freedom of opportunity where you can work for free. You can go work at your church. You can work at the nonprofit. You can work at so many different organizations that legitimately need your help. And if you don't have to charge them, then fantastic, right? But sitting on the couch all day, that's not really the kind of people that get to this. What I mean by that is if you are determined enough, hardworking enough, skilled enough to actually surpass that financial freedom number, then you're not the type of person usually that's the sit on the couch kind of person already, right? Like, you're an action taker. You are a big thinker. You are a dreamer, a believer, and you can't turn those things off. You look at some of the richest people in the world, and why do they keep working? They have more money than they could ever spend. They keep working because that's who they are. They can't turn it off. They can't stop it. What would they do? Just sit out on the couch? Just sit on the beach? No, that's not their personality. So that was something that we had a kind of an uncomfortable moment on several years ago. It was like, okay, we thought we were going to get there. We're going to relax. We're going to travel. We're going to do these things. And that was fine for 2 or 3 weeks. And then it was like, no, like, we need to grow. We need the challenge. I need to build something, right? Like, I can't turn this off. So if that is who you are, just know that this is probably the path in front of you, right? If you get to this number, it's not likely that you're just going to sit on the couch and watch soap operas, right? Like, people who get to this are very highly motivated, determined, hardworking, hustling people, and you can't turn that kind of stuff off.
The one word that comes to mind when I think of financial freedom is discipline. I think discipline is something that I feel like I've developed in my life through the past decade. And it's not just discipline in one area, it's discipline in every area. And so I think because I've mastered it in one area, I'm able to, apply it to other areas of my life. And being disciplined in your finances, I think, again, will carry over to being disciplined in your marriage, being disciplined in your relationships, being disciplined in working out and taking care of your body and eating healthy and drinking water and whatever it may be, right? It's like that muscle that you build. And so I think practicing discipline within your life will help you, is a great skill or trait to acquire that financial freedom. And so if you don't have discipline, practice it. It just takes practice. It's one thing that you just got to do it over and over and over again. And your body and your mind will fall into place, and then it'll start attributing to other areas of your life.
So to put this into actionable steps for people, if this is your dream, if you want to retire, if you want to hit your financial freedom number, I want to stress that it is so easy for everyone to do in a long game, right? Like if you gave yourself 20 or 30 years, perfect. Then go at it, create a plan, because these plans can be very simple, right? Just a few pieces of real estate can and will surpass your financial freedom number really in 10 or 20 or 30 years. You don't need huge deals to be able to do this. So if you're the person that's like, I don't know, I'm on the fence, I'm not a big kind of, business woman or businessman, like that's totally fine. You can for sure do this. You can do this if you're a single mom. Just make the commitment to do it now, to start today, because time is the most important aspect in this equation. The longer you let this thing run, the sooner you get there. So figure out, what is this number, right? Literally write down a number. It is my expenses, take away the bad debt. What does it cost me to live every single month? Write that number down, put it on your mirror. How do I get there, right? If it's $4,000 or $6,000 or $8,000, how do I surpass that? And maybe not this year, or maybe not even in the next 5 years, but what is a plan to reasonably get there in 10 or 20 years, considering you're going to be paying down debts, you're going to be increasing rents, right? Like it's super practical for everyone to do it. So I would encourage anyone who is feeling stuck in their job, feeling stuck in life, to pursue this, right? It is the freedom of opportunity. It is not about being rich. Mm-hmm. It is about having the choices to say, today I want to live my life and do these things, and no one can tell me I can't do it. I can do whatever I choose to do because my time is my own now.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Donkey and the Bee. Make sure to click subscribe below, and we will see you on the next one.